The college football playoff selection show is tonight, but before we get there, I want to talk about each team's percent chance of realistically getting into the playoff. We'll go ahead and knock out the first 8. Oregon, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, Tennessee, and Indiana. All of these teams either are undefeated, 1 loss or 2 loss. They play in a conference championship, or they're done playing games and they're already in the college football playoff top 12. So let's look at somebody like Notre Dame. They're 11-1. They were in the top 12. They play no more games. They will stay there. Ohio State is a 2 loss, but they were in the top 5 last week. They're not dropping out of the top 12. They'll be there. Next up that I want to talk about with 100% chance of making the playoffs, SMU. A lot of people are not giving SMU the quote-unquote credit that they deserve. I am a firm believer that this is a 100% playoff team. I look at 2021-2022 TCU for this exact reason. TCU played all of their regular season games. They had 7 one-possession wins against unranked opponents. They did not look like a quote-unquote dominant top 4 team. They go to the Big 12 championship and lose to Kansas State, yet the College Football Playoff Committee did not punish them for that loss and got them into the playoffs anyway. SMU is already a top 10 playoff ranked team. I do not think them losing to Clemson in the championship game for the ACC will drop them out of it. We have seen time and time again, the playoff committee is never going to punish a team that plays an extra game because they were 1 or 2 in the conference standings. So SMU to me has a 100% chance of making the college football playoff. Now let's go into the bubble. First team I want to talk about, Boise State. They play UNLV in the Mountain West Championship. This to me is a lot closer game than people think. Automatically giving Boise State this bid is a mistake. They are not locks to win this game. I give them a 54% chance of winning. I really like UNLV's team. I've watched them play multiple times this year. The one game that I can remember off the top of my head was that game versus Syracuse. And I have been high on Syracuse all year long, and they took them to overtime. This is the same Syracuse team that just beat Miami. So with that being said, I think Boise State has a lot more on their hands than people want to give UNLV credit for. That's why I've got them at around a 54% chance to make the playoff. If they lose the game, obviously they're out. UNLV is in. But with that being said, we are moving on to Alabama. That's the first team I want to talk about on the fringe. I give Alabama a 58% chance to make the college football playoff. If you look at other playoff predicting metrics, they have Alabama at around a 30 to 35% chance. The only thing that matters here to me is SMU beats Clemson, and I give SMU a 58% chance to beat Clemson. Therefore, Alabama would take that number 11 spot. If you look at the way that the AP poll has ranked out the teams so far, they have Alabama at 11th. Now, of course, the AP poll is not the college football playoff poll, but this was according to the losses from last week's rivalry week. And the team that I'm looking at that dropped below Alabama in the AP poll, and I'm expecting to drop below Alabama in the college football playoff poll, was Miami. They lose to Syracuse. It was their second loss to an unranked team. They don't have any signature victories outside of maybe a Florida, which of course they're unranked. But regardless, Miami dropped to 14 on the AP poll. I think Miami will drop to maybe 13 in the college football playoff poll. Alabama will sneak into that 11th spot and guarantee them a college football playoff bid if SMU beats Clemson. Now let's talk about that. Let's go to Clemson. I give them a 42% chance of making the college football playoff. The only thing that they have to do is beat SMU, and they get the ACC auto bid. If that happens, Alabama comes out, Clemson comes in. I think SMU slides down to that 11th spot, and then we move on from there. Next thing I want to talk about, the Big 12. I have Arizona State and Iowa State with a straight 50-50 chance of making the college football playoff. Both of these teams have looked absolutely dominant this season, and both of these teams have looked like they don't belong in the playoff this season. We've seen Iowa State recently drop continuous games that they should have won or play games way closer than they should, like UCF a few weeks ago. With that being said, I think Arizona State edges this one out, but I'm not going to make an official prediction. That's why I have this at an exact 50-50. That's to determine probably the 12 seed. I think if Boise State wins, they will take over the auto bid 4 seed. So right now, my playoff looks like Oregon, number 1. I guess Texas would be my SEC winner right now. Boise State at the 4 spot. Potentially, I think it would be SMU at the 3 spot. So we've got Oregon, Texas, SMU, Boise State. Those are the 4 big auto bid winners. Then we have Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Georgia, Tennessee, Indiana in some kind of order. And next up we have Alabama, and then we have the winner of the Big 12 championship game, whether that be Arizona State or Iowa State. We could technically see Miami, but I give Miami around a 10% chance to make the college football playoff. I am not buying on this team. They have let up way too many points throughout the season, even in their victories. They play almost every single game close. I mean, we go back and we think about that Virginia Tech Hail Mary that got overturned. It ended up being a Miami victory, but very well could be a Miami loss. I think about Duke. I think about the Georgia Tech game, now the Syracuse game. Miami is probably out of the playoff, but I will give them a puncher's chance with this committee to accidentally slip them into that 11th spot. South Carolina, I give South Carolina probably a 25% chance to make the college football playoff. This is strictly due to the fact that the playoff committee is determined to take the 12 best teams. And right now, in my opinion, South Carolina is playing better football than Alabama is. The difference between South Carolina and Alabama, though, is the head-to-head matchup. The committee is going to have to determine if a game that took place 8 or 9 weeks ago matters more than who's playing better right now. If you look at Alabama, they've lost to Oklahoma, they've lost to Vanderbilt, and they lost to Tennessee. South Carolina lost to Kentucky, Alabama, and LSU. I think South Carolina has a slightly better resume, but the head-to-head, does it matter? In my opinion, it kind of has to. I am not a big believer of the games have to matter every single time. It's pretty clear when you see like a fluke game. Like I think Alabama beating Georgia was more of a fluke game than people want to think. That first half with all these Georgia turnovers and explosive Alabama plays, would that happen again in a rematch? I'm not so sure, but that's a lot of speculation. The clear one that I want to talk about is about 4 weeks ago in my top 25 poll, I ranked SMU ahead of BYU. Even though BYU beat SMU, I could clearly see with the rest of the games being played out that SMU was the much better team far and away from BYU. And then I went back and watched that game. Kevin Jennings didn't even play the whole game, and SMU still almost won. Kevin Jennings is the current starting quarterback for SMU. He got the bid 3 or 4 games into the season after the presumed starter Preston Stone got benched. All that being said, I firmly thought that SMU was a better and more deserving team to go to the playoffs or be higher in the top 25 than BYU, even with the head-to-head matchup. I understand the games have to matter, but at some point we have to be able to see beyond a 3-point victory for BYU or a 1-possession victory for Alabama against Georgia. I think the head-to-head versus Alabama and South Carolina matters because the records are identical, the losses are not necessarily comparable, and you have the head-to-head there. So Alabama gets a higher bid or a higher percent chance for a bid for me, I guess, for now. But South Carolina, with a 0.25% chance, 25%, could definitely sneak past the Crimson Tide with a great victory versus number 12 Clemson. But regardless, I'm going to wrap this video up and say, None of those percentages matter if Clemson wins the ACC championship game. Alabama has 0% chance to make the playoffs if Clemson wins because SMU is not dropping out of the top 25. So that's going to wrap it up. You can see my playoff bracket here, and let me know what you think in the comments before the College Football Playoff Committee picks their teams tonight. We'll see if I'm right. I think that I will be, but next time we'll talk about it and give our reaction. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.